Welcome to the Lobbying Congress small group. Yes. Oh, you can? All right, how's that? Better. All right, so this is officially the Lobbying Congress small group. We've got a few facilitators here and then want to spend most of the time having it be a conversation amongst all of us or in smaller groups too. We actually don't have a ton of time, so we're not going to be able to do everything, but hopefully we will get ourselves started here, and then that will lead to even more action down the road. I'll introduce myself. I am Christy Levitt. I have lived in D.C. for about 18 years now, a Ward 6 resident the whole time. In my professional life, I do environmental advocacy, and I've done lots of lobbying on the Hill, some proactive and lots of defense over the years. And I'm really excited about all the enthusiasm here for Lobbying Congress. One quick thing is there's sign-in sheets going around. So the biggest mission we have is that everyone who is in the room definitely should sign in and add your name and your email address so we can continue to work together before you leave this room. And if we need more going around, we will get that started too.
Introduce myself. Hi, I'm Donica Petrocious. I'm here as a parent of a public school parent of 2 kids. But so I've spent a lot of time advocating in DC for public schools. But I also, in my professional life, I work on federal education policy and advocacy and spent 10 years in the Senate. So I think I'm supposed to offer some of that experience here.
My name is Josh Birch. Oh, hello, sorry. I run a group called Neighbors United for DC Statehood, local DC organizing group. In particular to this session, I've spent a lot of days off of work on the Hill or emailing and pestering the hell out of people at 9:30 at night. In particular, recently I've focused more on the Senate for some reason than the House, but that's sort of maybe what I bring to this.
My name is Bo Schuff. I serve as the Director of Advocacy for DC Vote, which I'm starting to call the statewide organization for DC Equality. I come from a background of both candidate campaigns as well as advocacy organizations, and have also spent time on the Hill. So, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, maybe. So maybe what we're going to do is we've done traditional things like having lobby days on the Hill, doing email campaigns, doing Twitter campaigns. But what we want to try to do from this group here is maybe find out either what else we could do, and I say we, I'm not talking about the people on the panel, I'm talking about everybody in this room and around the other 8 wards in the district. What could or should we be doing in the District of Columbia better or differently to especially as it deals with congressional lobbying for statehood and HandsOffDC?
Hi, I'm Lisa, live in Ward 6. I think I'd just like to understand what would really change the mind of the congressmen that are in office. Like, what is it that would do the trick? Is it the pressure from the people from other states writing and putting pressure on the Congress people? Like, what's the trick?
Yes and no. So I think that, strategically, we have to think about the advocacy you do as both trying to change people's minds, but also something we don't talk enough about is bolstering our supporters. So we really have, some of what we're going to win is not because we're going to change people's minds, but because we're going to get enough people to stop what those other people are doing. So the calls and letters that a lot of you have already been working on are really critical. I would just ask you to not just send them to Jason Chaffetz and all those guys. Send them to the people who we know are friendly to us so they can use our information and say, I got as much information about that also on the other side of it, and I'm willing to help us stand up against it. The other thing that I've really been thinking about in our last panel a lot is that the House Oversight Committee and the DC Government Affairs Committee that deal with the DC laws are super important. But there's committees in each of those in the House and Senate that deal with our issue areas. So the committees that deal with the judiciary, who handle the gun laws nationally, the education committees that deal with much of the school funding, and we're going to find a lot of friends on those. So I think we have to be creative about not just focusing narrowly, but being more wide. In terms of the tactics, letters and calls for sure, I would love to see us, and I'm not aware of what all of you, I know you do a ton of this, so they already do this, but I know in education, I can speak from that perspective, we need to do a better job of organizing parents to really go to and give our friends information about what we really don't like about what they're doing in DC and with their funding laws. Who are the people that have been affected by it, and help prepare each other, all of us help prepare each other to talk about it so we can be available. One of the things that our education folks in the Hill always tell me is like, we call DC and say we need someone to testify, and it's like silence, because we don't know who's ready on education to tell our story. That's probably not true in a lot of your areas because you got all these people organized. So I think getting faces in front of the congressmen and senators on all those sides is really, really helpful too.
I just want to add, and I talked a little bit about it in the other panel, because we don't have any direct representation, this is really a fight that we need your help on, and that is talking to your friends and family outside of DC. And the biggest thing that I can't stress enough is that it's not about facts and figures, it's not about numbers, it's not about studies, it's not about any of that. It's about getting your friends and family to emotionally connect with this issue and transmitting that emotion to their elected officials. So I would encourage, the most powerful message is something that has emotion attached to it that comes from a constituent. And if you can figure out where you have spheres of influence, it doesn't matter if they're on the oversight committee or not, because in order to overturn any of our laws, the entire House and the entire Senate have to pass it. Get them all. And to echo your point, Congress people's spines are built on voter contact. They will have one if we build it for them. So we absolutely have to bolster those people that are our supporters.
And I would just echo what people said. And one of the things that our group does is we send thank you cards to everyone who co-sponsors a statehood bill. And our group, sometimes our meetings are 20 people, sometimes they're 60, sometimes they're 1. But we get people to say thank you to senators, and we drop this thank you cards off because we want to thank them for it. When I was biking over here, I ran into Senator Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin, and I stopped her and I said, "Senator, I want to thank you for co-sponsoring the DC statehood bill. We really appreciate it." And she said, "Hey, it's the right thing to do. Thank you for stopping me." And I think we have to keep doing that. And I think that's a really good point. Like we're always so like fight for DC and like, because we have so many people attacking us, but we also have to take time to thank people because we have to coalition build. And you do that, as Bo's saying, by making it personal in different venues.
Look at her.
Hi. So for somebody who doesn't do this as a living but who wants to get involved, is there a website, and maybe you guys have already done this, of sort of a cheat sheet for us on who to talk to about which issues, who is pro this issue, who is anti this issue? That way those of us who don't know how to do this can say, I care about this issue, and I click here and it says, call these people or visit these people or email these people because they oppose it and all of these people support them. Contact them and tell them thank you.
Yes. I can tell you from a DC autonomy perspective, DC Vote and Neighbors United have tools like that. DC Votes will match you with your elected officials. So if you're worried about, if you live in DC, you're going to be matched to Eleanor Holmes Norton. If you're talking about your own friends and family, though, if they click on the same link, it'll match them based on their zip code to their elected officials. And it's designed that you click if you click send, it's going to deliver the positive message to the people who have been good, and the negative message or the persuasive message to the people who are not yet good on our issues. That's for autonomy. The education and DCVote.org.
You get that, dcvote.org. For each of the individual issues, so different organizations working on different issues usually or often have that information up on their website. There isn't a central place where you can find it all. For the Oversight Committee, Charles now has Councilmember Allen now has a list of all the folks that he's tweeted out and posted on Facebook. That's a good list to know of for all the members on that committee. And for a lot of the things that are coming up where we're getting that pushback, that's going to be the committee that we want to target. It has about 20 Republican members, about slightly less than that Democratic members, and that's where both the folks who might be going against us, that we want to make sure they hear from people from DC, as well as those who are the champions and should be there fighting for us. We need to make sure that they hear from folks in DC. So that's a good, if you're, is it on the back, both over the card? Oh. Look at right there. at your fingertips even. So that's a good list for all of us to have when we're talking about any of these issues that they're going to be pushing back on and where we need to hold our line, and definitely for both champs and for folks who are opposed.
I'll just say, because I do education all day, if you want to learn more about the problems with the DC voucher system and other issues, ncpecoalition.org is a national coalition focused on that, and they have a lot of information about all of the things that are happening around this potential choice voucher system, including members and bills and things like that.
Okay. Hi. I'm someone who lives on Capitol Hill, has been here for about 30 years, and worked on the Hill for 25 years, the last 15 for that crazy lefty liberal Pete Stark, as his chief of staff. And I just want to kind of emphasize what you all are saying. It's about their constituents. It's really not about us. So to the extent you have relatives anywhere, get them to communicate, or let them use their address and you communicate to their elected officials. But the other thing that I'm thinking about while we sit here is Elijah Cummings is the ranking member on the Government Oversight Committee. He's a wonderful member of Congress from Baltimore. He's not from very far away. I don't know if there have been conversations with Congresswoman Norton and with him to see if we could get a group of Democrats together to help through the Democratic caucus, maybe, get everybody on board DC Vote, which shows some strength there, and start having them help think about ways, notifying us when things are happening on the Hill so that we can turn people out. I mean, some of my favorite memories on the Hill are being at hearings where local people stood up protesting, and Republicans run like hell when that happens. And it matters when you have a whole room of red DC shirts or a whole room of whatever the topic is, that really affects them. I mean, I've seen them turn the lights out on hearings because they did not know how to react with people being in the room. So we're all here. We can go to these events, and we need to, organize and do that. And I'm happy to help any way I can with connecting with the caucus and see if we can get some Democratic work on our side with us to give us that insight.
And I would just add, one of the things that our groups have been doing is trying to get people in the states to write op-eds, because it's not just about it is fundamentally about contacting members of Congress. But if I get my mom to contact Senator Warner and Senator Kaine, which she does repeatedly because she's a Virginia voter now, that has some effect. But she got something published in the Roanoke Times earlier this year, and all of a sudden 80,000 people in Southwest Virginia are reading it, and maybe some of them are actually then calling on our behalf too. So I think there's all these different levels and tools that we have to use and access, and we can provide those resources. We can provide the scripts for emails. We can provide the templates for op-eds. It's something that's very simple and easy. But what we have to do is use our networks in the states. We have to ask people. We have to have that conversation over Thanksgiving dinner that might make some people uncomfortable. We have to have it. We have to, I said this for some of you who weren't in the room before, we have to be selfish in the District of Columbia and start standing up for ourselves and asking that people stand with us. We stand up for every other great cause around, but we have to stand up for ourselves too. The51st.org is the blog that I have, and it's one of the tabs in there.
And then we've got some on dcvote.org as well. The one thing that I will say about it, they don't care about when DC people talk to them. That's true when they're at work. We all live in Ward 6. Well, a lot of us live in Ward 6, which is where a lot of them live as well. I am in my building. I know that Congressman Mark Takano lives there, and I know that Reince Priebus lived there until about, I don't know, maybe the 20th of January. And yeah, I know. Well, it was some bipartisan, whatever. He's gone. I don't know which ward got him now, but it's not mine. Even better. But you have the ability to lobby in the instant. Right? Like, I saw Congressman Takano the other morning in our lobby waiting for his lift as I was waiting for my lift. And I took a moment to talk to him. Tammy Baldwin on the street. Grab a Facebook, not the app, but the actual old school book of faces, and learn who the representatives are that live in your area. A lot of those are published, their addresses and stuff. Unfortunately, Chaffetz sleeps in his office, so you can't grab him, but take that opportunity to lobby in the instant. In that, if you are willing to do that, that's a different level of passion. Please be respectful and nice and all of that kind of stuff, but they know that you're paying attention. They've got to live with you.
Hi, my name's Emily Phelps. I'm from Ward 6. I live at 7th and Q. I'm also a former congressional staffer, and I'm with a group called the Indivisible Guide, and I'm completely floored by this amazing event, and everybody who put it on should feel really proud, and everyone here should be really pumped. This is awesome. I wanted to formally put out my hand to everybody individually here and say I'd love to be in touch about call scripts and placing op-eds and all of the best stuff that we can muster as a district. For those who aren't familiar, Indivisible, like the Women's March and other fabulous groups, is one of the post-Trump networks there are constituent groups forming in each of these targeted districts of 20 people to 700 people, many groups in each district. A lot would be really eager to be our pen pals, I think. So while we're, so I'd love to talk, and while we're all here, I'd love to hear from folks, big or small, things that have worked in the past when it comes to lobbying from outside the district on behalf of the district, whether it's individual stories from uncles and aunts that have worked, or historical episodes. For those of us who don't have the institutional memory on this, that would be great. And thanks.
Do you guys have examples that you want to share, or more questions?
Oh, well, I had a question, which is very much a shout out to Indivisible. When asking my mom in California or my cousin in Michigan to write on our behalf, I was curious: is there some way we can channel them to a local issue of importance? And they will change from time to time. But in each of these districts, Mr. Blum's in Ohio, Mr. Gowdy's in South Carolina, Mr. Farrenhold's in Texas, where the message is, why aren't you paying attention to the big sinkhole outside the Walmart in Texas? And why are you worried about gun legislation in Washington? I think that kind of thing, when it makes the local media or something, the pressure. I'm not, by the way, in any kind of congressional lobbying. It's very far from my work. But I do think that if the attention, if the thrust is to have these people pay attention to their own backyard, which is their responsibility, and to tell Republicans to become the party of limited government, please, since that's the lip service they've paid for 40 years on it, that they should worry about the sinkholes and let us worry about our sinkholes.
Donica has something to add to that in one, or a story she'll share in just a second. But one thing for that, I think, to know those stories and to be able to share them amongst this group of people, we just need some people here to spend some time looking on the internet and find those stories and share it with the rest of us. So if some set of people want to do that, that would be an awesome thing to do.
Can I get
Team, we have a first volunteer team.
I do think the power of all the things we've been talking about is really important. Of course, this is 20 years ago, but when they originally offered the bill to do DC vouchers, which was wildly unpopular by our public and our community, standalone bill, the Senate was able to filibuster it, not just because those individual senators from other places fought it, but partially because Eleanor Holmes Norton went around and got the entire Black caucus and Hispanic caucus. They actually marched over from the House and stood on the Senate floor and embarrassed those people into doing the right thing because the District of Columbia didn't want it. And the only reason, and that was because a lot of people wrote to them, a lot of people lobbied them. There's a huge effort. The only reason it exists today is because they knew they couldn't do it in the open face a day, so they slipped it into a larger appropriations bill, and it just kind of happened. But that is I want to go to your point that these big moments can happen, but we have to build the groundswell. And just one more thing: when you're writing your letters or your calls, or your friends in Washington State or wherever they are, tell the story of how it impacts them. So don't just say, I don't like this, you need to support statehood. Like, try to explain to people what it means to have representation. I don't think many people in our country know how good they have it, that they have representation. And we need to sort of explain it to people, or in the education, say what it will mean that we're undermining our public monies and having unaccountable schools with the public money and those kinds of things. So tell the real story, because I've also seen like when they really get into this, they will read those stories about Donica in DC whose children had this happen to them or whatever. And we'd love to see the people in Utah, your family members, saying, my children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews in Washington, D.C., this is what's happening. So make them very, very personal.
I would just like to add a dimension that maybe hasn't been discussed yet to the idea of reaching out to people in these members' districts, which is that these people really care. It, in many ways, inspired 99% by the Indivisible Guide. I started working with a campaign to reach out to people in Utah's 3rd, which is Jason Chaffetz's district. As has been said, there's plenty of districts that need outreach, but limited resources call for a narrow strategy. The campaign is called Defend DC, if anybody's interested. And there's been 2 parts. One is crowdfunding and advertising campaign, which is more of a medium, long-term project. The short-term project has been finding indivisible groups and pantsuit groups and pro-Trump groups and every other bubble that exists in the Utah world of Facebook and posting on their walls. And I cannot tell you how many comments I see on every single post, and other people are starting to do it with me. And the 2 big takeaways are, one is that people just don't know about this, which I find really encouraging, because if they did know and they were complicit, then we'd be really screwed. But they don't know. And the second is that when they find out, they really care, and they seem to be just as angry as we do. I find this especially in anti-Chaffetz groups, progressive groups, democratic groups, where people are already predisposed to agreeing with our cause and our mission. And if they don't know, and they're learning and joining our cause, then the 100,000 plus margin that Chaffetz has in his district of conservatives, many of whom go to the LDS Church, which has a deep-seated, deep-rooted wariness of the federal government, they'll care as well. And I think that's a big part of our mission, is education and information. I don't want to drag this on for too long. There are certainly some comments that will make your blood boil, and I try not to engage with them. And it doesn't matter, because we don't need to convince 100% of the people. But the bottom line is that there are people who don't know and do care, and Facebook and Twitter are incredible platforms to connect our bubble to their bubble and build a bridge.
Hi, this is going to sound a little bit of a Debbie Downer, but I'm one of those people. I've lived in DC since '04, proud Ward 6 resident, but my family is rural boonies, Georgia, at most apolitical, mostly Trump, ultra-conservative. They see DC as a bunch of corrupt politicians. They don't realize that there are residents there. But that's not the point. The point is that I cannot get my mother or my sister or my direct network to even vote. I cannot even get my sister, who has a little girl who's about to turn 4, to pay attention to her local school board elections. So that's my challenge right there, that if I can't get them to advocate for themselves, I'm much less going to have even more success to get them to write letters and call congressmen for me. But it's not all negative. I know that there's also networks within Georgia, like student groups, universities, coalitions that care about some very progressive issues. So when you say things like, reach out to your internal network. My network isn't going to work for me, but what are some ways that these organizations such as DC Vote or DC United that can reach out to those hubs, those progressive activist hubs in non-DC states to build a partnership and build a coalition? Because for me, like my personal network, it's just not going to work.
So in terms of building connections, this past year, the district government gave a small grant to the League of Women Voters in the District of Columbia. And what the League had been doing for the 2 previous years is they had been going to their national conferences and talking with their members in other states. And they finally got a resolution at the beginning of last year passed so that the League of Women Voters formally endorsed statehood, which is great because now they have that as part of their lobbying agenda. They support statehood. They want, whenever they're at the Hill and they want to do lobbying, statehood's part of what they advocate for. But what the district government grant did is it provided the League of Women Voters in D.C. money to go to the states so that we could talk to the local chapters so that those local chapters could then be turned into our advocates. And I was one of the League of Women Voters people. I went to Illinois, and I went on Friday after the election. So if you want to talk about some folks that were down, go to talk to the League of Women Voters in the state of Illinois after the election last year. But what happened there is that it was sort of like what happened, I think, in the district and across the country after the Women's March. People realize that they have to get up and they have to do something because we can't sit idly by. You guys could have sat idly by and gone home tonight, but you came out. And so I think by going out, getting to the states, talking with those groups, whether it's the NAACP, the League of Women Voters, we need to start turning those allies, not just into allies, but advocates on our behalf. And that's a powerful network when we don't just have the national that sort of says, yeah, we support this, but when we all of a sudden start having the NAACP from Chicago calling Senator Duckworth and saying, hey, welcome to the Senate. By the way, you need to support statehood for D.C. too. That's much more powerful than individual calls are great, but then all of a sudden you have coalitions behind those calls. It's a huge asset. And I think, whether it's a union, a civic group, or a national advocacy group, we need to start relying on those networks to become our advocates around the country.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm going to brag on DC Vote for a little bit because we had a decent week. Beginning of the week, we sent a letter up to Congress with 28 organizations, national, local, and regional, in support of DC autonomy on all 3 bills. No matter what their opinion was on the underlying bills, they all said, keep your hands off DC, basically. In addition, we spent last weekend in Baltimore at the DNC Chair Forum, all the people running for DNC Chair. By the end of the forum, Keith Ellison was wearing a statehood pin on him on stage, and 6 of the candidates actually talked about statehood, and that's never happened before. And the lesson that comes to me as it builds on what Josh is saying is it's about turning allies into advocates. And we have got to, we in DC, even if you're not super political or at some level connected to people who work or are involved with advocacy organizations, which means you are on 19,000 email lists asking you for money or asking you to click and do this every single time. Stop doing it without strings. If somebody asks you for $5 to support this cause or whatever, call them first and find out what their position is on statehood and what have they done about it. If a congressman from another city calls you and wants $100 for some fundraiser because he's going to be at number 9 for the 1700th time this week, put strings on it. We have to go to the next level and start requiring those folks who are great at lip service. And I'll be honest, Keith Ellison has been great at lip service, but the fact that he was willing to take it to the next level and put a pin on stage, on camera, on C-SPAN during the entire forum says something different to me. And so it's time to do that to all of we need to not only move our enemies to being neutral, we need to move our allies to being advocate. We have to move the entire spectrum towards this. I want to get to a point personally, if you ever go to a Democratic event, there is a speech that's given by every single person and they all list the same issues, right? You can list them with me. Education, abortion, labor, LGBT issues, etc., right? And then they stop. Those are the organizations who have been heavily successful at influencing allies into becoming advocates. Statehood needs to become in that list as far as I'm concerned. And we need to expect from the Democrats to be the next level, and we need to be able to move Republicans up to, being supportive more than they are. There are some, and I'm speaking in broad generalizations, but there are some that are better than others. But I want to go back to your initial question about your sphere of influence. I'm not going to knock it, but frankly, I just don't believe you. Those are not the only people you know. And if worse comes to worse, troll complete strangers on Facebook.
Hi, good afternoon or good evening. One question I have for the folks from DC Vote and also you, Jason, and maybe other folks up there as well is what work has been done to try to cultivate sort of high-profile validators for DC Vote and DC statehood issues, whether that's celebrities, whether that's, moderate Republicans who have some sway to the extent that they still do, the DC sports franchises, businesses that bring, that have conventions here or that, are based in the DC greater area. It seems like with, the Indiana Religious Liberty Bill, for example, one of the things that was really powerful is having groups like Salesforce and companies like Apple speak about it and other kind of high profile validators. And obviously on LGBT issues, there have been tons of celebrities you could name. I can't think of one on DC statehood, and I'm just curious if there have been service members who have fought to bring democracy to the Middle East and don't have it here at home. That kind of powerful message, it would seem like it would resonate, but I'm curious whether that's been successful, if there are any people who might be potential faces for this.
One, I'm going to let you in on a little secret, first of all. Between Josh's organization and my organization, there are 2.5 staff. Josh has 0. I've got them all, and it's 2.5. So wholeheartedly with you. And we've done a little bit. We've been successful a little bit, but there is a resource allocation challenge some days. We got Bryce Harper put on a 51st State shirt. I'm sorry, John Oliver did an amazing, if you have not watched John Oliver's Facebook, if you need to know what to talk about with Facebook, send John Oliver's link to everyone you know. I mean, seriously, it's phenomenal. But it is a matter of resource allocation. It is that we would love to do all of those things. We work with Events DC to try and find places we can cooperate with them when they're going out to bring business to DC. We talk to different community organizations. We've had Wale involved with different stuff at different points. But those types of relationships take time, and the bigger they are, the less likely they are to engage in an issue that isn't clear cut. One of the reasons why LGBT issues were able to get those types of spokespeople is that equality became very clear cut within the American psyche. We've talked endlessly that people don't know this issue, and so if they're not willing to advocate on the issue because they don't know the issue, then the companies aren't willing to go, no, we'll go on a limb for you. We're not quite at that point yet. With a lot of it. But so it's resource allocation. It is absolutely trying to educate more people. It is, if you have a connection to somebody, let me know, and we will absolutely reach out and get them going.
Can I?
All right, Laura or Jamal, are we over time already? We are okay. Okay, let's do one more question, and then let's.
Oh, I have the mic here. I'll try to make this as quick as possible because I see the woman in front of me also has a question. So I actually am from Utah, and the high school where Chaffetz was booed the other night is my high school. And I never thought that would have been a claim to fame living in Washington, D.C., and suddenly it is. I'm a small business owner. I grew up in Salt Lake City. My whole family still lives there. He is my mother's representative and several of my good friends. The only reason I bring that up is I know nothing about politics. I'm an architect. I just bought a house here. But clearly this is an issue that resonates very strongly. All of my family and friends, by the way, hate the guy. But it occurred to me that if I could somehow connect with others that, I think it's a strong assumption that, or a pretty good assumption that most people, or a good majority of people in DC are not from here originally. So I was wondering if anybody has suggestions as to the best way to sort of organize groups that might be sort of like Utah transplants that are now living in DC, and then therefore other states. And I thought how effective it would be if not only we tell our family to write and complain, but also to actually write in their letters and say, my son lives in DC, and if you continue this business, I'm going to really start to advocate strongly against you, and I am one of your constituents. So I just thought maybe I'd like suggestions on the best way. I could form a Facebook group, but I don't really know how that's going to get the word out. So does anybody know of any resources out there that say, hey, if you live in DC, or could we form something like this? If you live in DC and you're from another state, let's figure out who are the people with that, and then collectively, if there were 20 of us, exactly in my situation, we could actually probably make some influence.
Yeah, you definitely should talk with Peter behind you. So yeah, talk with Peter. And I think that's one of the things that we've been trying to do and track is finding out what people's networks are and what states they're from, or where they have friends and relatives that they can rely on. So that's something that we've been doing. My group, with our no budget and no staff and stuff, like we've been trying to focus on a few states, but that doesn't preclude anybody else from forming their own groups. I think that's one of the beautiful things about DC is people always say, oh, well, we have people that are so transient. I was like, well, that's actually a resource because we have so many people with connections and roots in other places that we need to tap into that. And I'm sure DC Vote is tracking like where people are from as well. So I think that's something that we do. I think if we did everything as well as it should be done, we would be a state and we all would be at home tonight. So there's always ways that we could improve upon what we're doing. So I think it'd be great if more people start forming their own groups, and our groups can help facilitate it. But I think sometimes just an organic group that starts can be the most powerful thing.
But just a quick follow-up. I imagine you guys will send out email, messages and so forth. Has anyone discussed actually taking the data into subcategories and saying, like, we'll send out a flash just to the group from Utah, or just to the group from Idaho?
Yeah, leading up to Jason's town hall the other night, we generated emails and ads directly just into his district. If you are a Facebook user in the 3rd Congressional District, you saw one of our ads, and that ended up leading you to an action that sent an email or got you to go to the hearing. So yeah, we absolutely can micro-target at that level. But I'm going to go back to our original point that we need your relationships first. Because they're not going to sign up for an email based on a Facebook ad. They're going to sign up because a friend told them that they should care about this issue. So we need both pieces.
You definitely have a question. Very last question. And then if we can take just a moment after this last question, and then just to talk next steps, because there's clearly a lot of energy and momentum in the room, and we don't want to lose that.
Just any of the ways that bring people into the city, and if so, what might be the most effective way to do that?
Yeah, we've run a couple of things. Airbnb actually contributed to the Statehood Yes campaign. They invited us to come speak to their owners Owners event, they gather their owners or their landlords, which I don't know the word, don't quote me. Hosts, thank you. That is what it is. They invited us to our host event and spoke to them. We've done TV ads in the taxi cabs as people are coming in from National and Dulles and BWI. We've done bus ads. We've done airplane gate, like the walking through the concourse ads. Most of those we've done in other places so that people see it when they're in their home turf. Because it turns out that a lot of people who use the DC airport live in DC. So those types of things have absolutely done. I'm going to go back to the same answer I gave the gentleman you're sitting next to, is that there's a resource challenge, that we have limited budgets and limited opportunities. So again, if you know folks who can donate or pro bono those items, let us know. We will absolutely take advantage of them.
All right, so I think we do need to wrap up, but a few things before we go. One is Lexi, when she was talking earlier, asking a question in the previous panel, had offered up training to help train people how to lobby, which a number of us could do. If I just get a show of hands of who would be interested in doing a lobby training. Okay, great. You can definitely add that to the agenda. And then folks in the room who already have lobby experience, even if it's just you on your own, or okay, great. That's really good too. And then so we will work on figuring out lobbying trainings. And then are folks in the room interested in having a lobby day that we set up for everybody to go up to the Hill on one day? Are people interested in, all right, we'll do that. Lobby day? Yes. Excellent. There is one on Wednesday that these guys, particularly around statehood, are doing. But we could do a lobby day for the whole oversight committee. And that would be pretty fun, doing a bunch of meetings like that. And in some places, one thing just to think about for the future, some places there's a group that goes to Senator Toomey's office each week in Philadelphia. And they're there every Tuesday, and they call it Tuesday with Toomey's. Tuesdays with Toomey. Too many S's there. But so people could think if we want to do a one-time thing and then make it a more regular thing, and maybe it's not everybody can go every week, but there's some number of people who go to maybe the chairman's office each Thursday, or whatever the thing might be. So that's another thing that we could potentially do, but definitely got a lobby day is something people want to do. For other clear next steps, we've got our research team up here for local in-district problems that people should be addressing. And we will, for everyone who's filled out the sign-in sheet, we'll definitely email out everybody. It didn't go to the middle, so for people who didn't get to sign into the sign-in sheets yet, hopefully they started in the sides. We can send them to the middle, but is there somebody on Councilmember Allen's staff that we could send it? All right, bring it down here to Laura. And Laura, so if you did not get a chance to sign in, you can send an email to Laura. And her email is
If you RSVP'd online through our website, then we already have your information, and we will be sending follow-up information on how to stay engaged. But if you did not RSVP, then please make sure we have your email address, and we will add you to that list.
Sure, it's L Marks. Oh, you have the thing.
L Marks, LMARKS at DC Council, DCCOUNCIL.US.
And I want to add, if you want to stay up to date with DC Vote and the Statehood Coalition stuff, you can take out your smartphone right now and text HandsOffDC, all one word, to 52886. It'll sign a petition that's going to go to Congress, and it'll keep you informed on what's going on with the DC Vote and the Statehood Coalition. So it's HandsOffDC to 52886.
And then two other wrap-up things. We obviously are a pretty big group, so one of the things we had talked about doing is figuring out when we can meet next. I think we need to figure out what sort of space could hold us next, and then via the email list, we will figure out a next meeting time, and maybe that part of that will be a lobby training. And if people want to keep talking now, there's a whole host of places on H Street. There's already some people up at H Street Country Club and Star and Shamrock. If folks would like to go to either of those places, we can keep talking more about how to lobby Congress and make our voices heard.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.